Hello, everyone. My name is Ky'Lend Adams, and I'm so excited for you all to be joining us for CAAPA's latest edition of Unplugged. This session today will be from freelance to full-time, and it'll be a conversation about the juggling that these panelists have done and are doing in their day-to-day careers as they navigate and manage their personal careers and talk about what it means to be in the performing arts, their journey thus far, and their journey to come. So first, I would like to introduce Bria LLoyd. Bria, I know you are a working documentaries. You are a mass media professional or journalist. Can you share a little bit of your highlight reel up until this point?
Yes, so thank you for introducing me, Ky'Lend. I went to George Mason in Fairfax, Virginia for college, and I focused on media studies there. And then after college, I started as a local news journalist on TV, and then I produced over the course of my career, and I have done documentary films like Ky'Lend mentioned, and that's what I'm doing as of now.
All right, thank you so much, Bria. Next up, we have Jospeh Matthews. Joseph, can you tell us a little about your career up until this point, a quick highlight reel?
Yeah, thanks, Ky'Lend. So I studied violin performance and arts management at Emory University, then went down to Miami for University of Miami School of Law. And then I jumped into the orchestra field where I've worked at the League of American Orchestras, the San Francisco Symphony, and most recently the Memphis Symphony. And as of today, I am on the staff of Carnegie Hall as the Assistant Director of Early Childhood Programs.
All right, congratulations. Next up, last but certainly not least, we have Justin Harrison. Justin, give us a quick highlight reel of your career up until this point.
Okay, thank you for having me, Ky'Lend. I have got my bachelor's and master's degree from Morgan State University and University of Maryland College Park. I am an opera singer. I sing locally in the area. I just recently made my debut at the Kennedy Center as a soloist. And my day job as a music educator, I work at a high school and elementary school. So I see all the kids from pre-K 3 all the way to 12.
All right. Congrats on that, working at Kennedy Center. And that's really big. All right. So just for those quick introductions, our viewers got to see that you all have your hands in a lot of different areas as it relates to the performing arts. So my next question is that, our generation is known for having many different side hustles, for navigating many different careers, having side jobs, also having a main job. Can you talk a little bit more in depth in regards to some of these jobs you have had, and also some of the skills that you gained from those jobs? So I'm gonna start with you, Joseph. You talk about your new role at Carnegie Hall. Can you tell us about some of the jobs that you've had that are preparing you for this new role that you're taking?
Yeah, I currently am working two side jobs right now, actually. One of them being with the Black Orchestral Network, which is a nascent organization that's founded to uplift Black orchestral musicians around the country. So specifically, probably with that role, I kind of have just gained more experience working to implement diversity, equity, and inclusion into the field, kind of at all levels, and then thinking about partnerships and communication strategies. And then also recently, I started working with the International Society for Music Educators, Music Education, and that really is a group of music education academic professors who have a yearly conference. So there, I'm really kind of learning about what the global landscape is of music education, and that kind of just informs my work in early childhood programs, specifically supporting well-being and the development of young families at Carnegie Hall.
That sounds great. Bria, I know you also recently started a new job at the top of the year as well. Can you tell us a little bit about that? And to some would say it was a shift a little bit in what you had done previously, up until you working specifically on working on documentaries and being a producer for that. So can you tell us a little bit about the careers you've had up until your current career?
Yeah, so as I mentioned a bit earlier, my first job was in local news on TV. And then after I left that job, after about 2 years, I did freelance for a bit. And so I freelanced as a producer for a marketing company for a few months. And then I also freelanced at an international news company, Al Jazeera English. And so I was kind of balancing those jobs until I could find my next main job. And then after that, I was a producer at the PBS NewsHour, where I worked on a few long-term projects as well, centered on race. Like I'm in America. I went to like Louisville, Kentucky, and we did a long-form piece on Breonna Taylor, which is probably one of the best projects that I did while I was there. And then I went to Newsy in DC, and these are all like in the DC area for the most part. And at Newsy, I was a producer as well. And then now I'm an investigative journalist at an NPR station out of New Haven and Hartford. And yeah, so since I've been here, I've gotten the chance to work in documentary films. And I actually went to Norway to produce a film earlier last year, or like the end of last year, about the prison system and comparing theirs to ours here. So that's what I've done so far.
Ooh, that's a lot, Bria. Before I go to Justin, I just want to follow up. You talked about the project that you worked on that specifically was about Breonna Taylor being one of the best works that you did. Can you tell us a little bit about why?
Yeah, that's a good question. I think it was also one of the main opportunities where I had a lot of time to work on it. So we worked on that for a couple of months, and we just interviewed a lot of people. So we got to talk to people who knew her, people in the area who are activists there. And I thought we were able to get a really good inside look at the system that failed her and getting to know what made her who she was. And I think that's why it was one of the best things that I worked on, because I was able to work on it so closely and get to know more about her and that area more so than I do on other projects where I don't have as much time.
Yeah. Justin, kind of speaking about what Bria and Joseph both kind of referenced. I know you are a performer. In addition, you are an educator. So can you talk about the various roles you've had and kind of the skills you've gained from that as you go through your career as a performer, but then also as an educator as well?
Yes. So as an educator, I deal with a lot of kids, and like I said, pre-K 3 all the way up to 12. So that's a wide range of different stages of people's lives. And through that, I kind of see as a performer what I was missing from my education and what I didn't gain. So I make sure that I try to educate and fill in that gap that I didn't get filled in when I was in high school and things of that nature. And vice versa, we talk about teachers always learning from their students, but in a way, I really do. I mean, the creativity and the open-mindedness that these kids have, I mean, they have really blown up my artistry of limitlessness of imagination, as which we as artists do need to push the boundaries. So for me, it's kind of been this circle thing of teaching has propelled my performing, and performing has propelled my teaching as far as transferable skills. So they all kind of work together in a good way.
That's great. And I think to your point in regards to transferable skills, and then something that you did was that you noticed where there were gaps that you saw that maybe you didn't get when you were a student in the performing arts. Something that I'm interested, and I'll start with you, is, May is Mental Health Awareness Month. And a big part of navigating all these various jobs is that your mental health plays a toll, right? We're giving so much to so much of our lives to our jobs. I'm just curious, how do you find the balance between being a performer and working at the Kennedy Center and all the other performance opportunities that you have, and then also being an educator for those many students? Like, how do you balance it all? And what does that look like to you?
A lot of it is organization, obviously. Google Calendar is my best friend because those reminders are a lifesaver. But also, for me personally, for a long time, I was very work. I can go from one job to the next and do a rehearsal at the very end. And through recent family and friend events, I decided, this is not what I want. And so I try to make more time to be with the people that I love and the people who I cherish my time with. So now I'm actually redefining what a work-life balance is and trying to form that in. So basically not saying yes to every single gig that comes my way. I don't need to do everything that, every gig that comes my way. I don't have to do every teaching assignment that my principal gives. Setting boundaries is key, and pacing yourself is key because burnout is real, as you all know, with teachers. So setting boundaries, organization, I think are my new foundation for a work-life balance.
All right. What about you, Joseph? How do you manage it all?
I think, self-care is just key. Always making sure, I like what Justin said about setting boundaries, making sure you find time for yourself, making sure you find time to do things that you like to do, and knowing how to, cut your email off, just really focusing on just enjoying yourself and not always being responsive in digital ways, and, just really clearing time just to kind of live life and not just always be kind of tied to emails and your phones.
Yeah. Bria, I'm curious for you, you work as a reporter, curating documentaries, and like you're basically the news, right? We know the news is 24/7. How do you manage having a work-life balance? How do you balance it with the fact that news is 24/7, and to a certain extent you are kind of on call depending on what's happening? How do you find the balance of that to maintain your own self-care and mental health?
That's a really good question. I think during the pandemic was, I think, when it started getting really difficult, as the news was just really heavy and a lot of terrible things were happening. And I think that's something in the line of work that I'm doing through the videos and the films that I'm producing. They are about very heavy topics and, like the Black community and other communities that are going through a lot of issues, and that can be very heavy mentally. Like you mentioned, that can take a huge toll on your mental health when you're faced with that in your personal life and just at work every single day. And I think I've also had a few work environments where there was racism and stuff like that that made it difficult to work. And then on top of that, you're doing stories on these really heavy, terrible things. So I think I had to realize that, one, if a work environment feels unhealthy, you need to leave. That's why I do tend to, I've had a few jobs since I've graduated. So going to spaces where you are welcomed and you are like appreciated and valued helps. And then, like Joseph and Justin have both said, just making sure that you set healthy boundaries.
Yeah, and I want to kind of follow up on that. And this is to whoever who wants to answer, but Bria, I will go to you first. Just because you talked a lot of what you just spoke about wanting, sometimes having to leave a job environment where it may not be healthy for you. And like, if you're setting the boundaries and they're kind of not paying attention to them, how do you leave? Like, what is the process for you? What has been the process for you when you've realized this job isn't working for me? I need something else. What has been that process?
Well, I've done it a couple times. I'm kind of a professional and leaving a job now. So yeah, if it's not working for me, I will tell them this sucks. This is not working for me. And if they don't fix it, I will leave. I think it's hard though, because you don't want to leave without a job lined up, because then you need money to live. So I think the first time that I left a job, that was the mistake I made, was leaving a job and not having money. So that's when I was freelancing a lot, because I was like, oh, I don't have a job lined up. So freelancing kind of helped me fill that gap for a bit.
Yeah. Justin or Joseph, curious, have any of you all had any experiences where you were in a situation with one of your jobs and you were like, this is not the best situation for me, I need to go? If so, what was that process like?
Yes. So for me, I had a issue with the store manager, the store owner.
What store, Justin?
And you say what?
I said what store, but I'm joking.
We'll leave the store nameless. And for me, I don't have a full-time job. I manage like 3 different part-time jobs. And so for me, at any given time, if I feel the need to drop a job, I can technically do that because I have 2 other jobs and freelancing gigs to supplement my pay. So for me, I kind of let my bosses kind of know that in a gentle way, just kind of saying, yeah, well, I got another job to get to. So everyone knows who I work with, knows, Justin's juggling a bunch of things, but if push comes to shove, he can kind of leave. So that's kind of where I'm at.
No, that's good. He said, basically, I let them know I'm juggling. So, if I don't like what they're doing, I'll just drop them and go to something else. That's a good one. A follow-up to that is, how do you find the balance between, you all kind of talked about it, but specifically, how do you find the balance between your personal and your professional endeavors, right? So a lot of times your career may ask you to move to a certain state, or maybe asking something out of you, but then personally you want to be somewhere else. Like, how do you navigate what professionally you want in your career goals while also what you may want personally? I'll start with you, Joseph.
I think that's a difficult question, and sometimes you can get lucky and find alignment in maybe like the place where you want to live, and what your professional path is, where that path is leading you. I think I've been lucky in the aspect that I really like New York City, and it just happens to kind of be the center of kind of like arts administration as far as like career opportunities, especially when it comes to like classical music, which is kind of where I work. But previously, working in orchestras in particular, you kind of have to make sacrifices, I guess, because there's, generally only a couple of symphonies in any one given city. So I've been from New York all the way to San Francisco, back to Tennessee, like, just moving all around. And knowing that I wasn't planning to stay in either San Francisco or Memphis super long term. So always kind of having my eye towards New York City and looking at those opportunities. But, I think that you really have to kind of think about your kind of long-term trajectory and how long are you willing to pursue an opportunity somewhere where you might not want to live and where you actually want to settle down. So I think there's a push and pull a little bit, but if you're lucky, I guess, like myself, you'll land where you want to be and in the place where you want to work.
No, that's great. What about you, Bria? How do you manage the personal and professional kind of outlook? I know you recently moved to New Haven, Connecticut from DC for your job.
Yeah.
Part of your personal plan?
No, I never thought I would live in Connecticut at all. It wasn't on my list, but I really wanted this job. So I feel like most of my career so far has just been following my dreams and my passions and focusing on my career. So I feel like personal life is something that I'm learning to focus on now. I think so far I like it here, but I have learned it's probably not somewhere that I want to stay forever or for a while. So I think now I'm at a point in my career where my next step would be more focused on what I want in my personal life and not so much what I want like professionally, or having both, but focusing on my personal life too.
Gotcha. What about you, Justin? How do you find the balance between what you may want personally versus what you may want professionally?
Like Joseph, I find myself to be lucky. I have a teaching job in the DMV area, which I want to live, and I have a decent singing career in this area as well. I know from my fellow singing colleagues, they go from house to house to house, which means a lot of travel, but they can't teach on the road like that. So at the current moment, I'm in a very lucky spot. I would like to do more singing, which will probably imply more traveling. So right now I'm in a lucky spot. That's all I can say on that.
All right. So I hear that luck plays a huge role into it, and then also knowing what field you're going into, and just knowing, to your point, Joseph, like New York is known for a lot of classical musicians, but also in the specific arts administration world that you want to work in. And to your point, Justin, also having an understanding of like being in the DMV areas, also, I would say, has a big classical musical scene and a great performance scene. And then Bria, yours is interesting in regards to you have kind of put in your head, like, I'm going to devote this to my professional life, knowing that once I get it to a certain point, I can then take the focus a little bit and move it to more to my personal, which I think is an interesting way that you all are navigating, which I think multiple people have different avenues of doing that, and you have to find out what works best for you. Speaking about what works best for you, Justin, you kind of touched on this a little bit. I'm curious, if you're presented with an opportunity, a job, a side hustle, a performance, what are the criteria that you kind of consider when defining if it's good for you? What are some things that you have to kind of say, okay, what is essential for you to accept a role, a job, or a performance? I'll start with you, Justin.
Yes. So one of the things I can consider is it artistically benefiting me? So am I going to be able to learn from it? Am I going to be able to put this on my resume for something else? Because as we know, as performers, it takes a lot of energy to do certain things, and we shouldn't be trying to do every single thing that comes our way. And this person, for me, who's a teacher by day, and then I have to go to rehearsals in the evening. That's like a full day from 9 to 9 at the bare minimum, or 7 to 9 really. So when I commit to something, I have to know I'm really giving up every bit of my day to work. So is it going to be beneficial to me artistically? Is it going to be beneficial to me financially? You know, am I going to be fairly compensated for all the rehearsals that I go to? And exposure as well. I mean, we talk about exposure, like that doesn't pay our bills, but can that get me to another gig that should arise from this, etc. So those things, artistic, financial, and exposure.
That sounds good. I was just thinking about, I remember I had a colleague who created a list and was like, if anyone ever said like, "Come give me this job for exposure," they would say, "Exposure doesn't pay my bills. Exposure, I can't call the credit card company and say, hey, here goes some exposure." So that just reminded me of that. Joseph, what are some things that you kind of consider when accepting a new role or job?
Come back to me on that one.
Will do. Bria, what are some things that you consider when taking on a new role or a job, specifically with your move, right? Or specific, as you said, you've had a lot of jobs, you know, you'll quit in a heartbeat if it isn't for you. What are some things that you then look towards for your next move?
I think the first thing is the work environment. If it's toxic or a place that you hate, you're not going to want to stay there and you're going to be miserable. So I think when I go to a job, I try to ask people who I know are already there or who have worked there in the past, like, hey, like, did you like this place? Like, what do you hate about it? If you hated something about it. So I know before, you know, like going into it, because I don't want to put myself in another bad position like I have previously. And, you know, like Justin said, money is a big factor. I think when you first start out in most, you know, careers, you probably will get like a lower salary. And I think it takes a while to learn what your worth is. You know, it's kind of uncomfortable to be like, oh, like I deserve X amount of dollars, because, you know, it's hard to figure out why. And explain that to someone that's going to hire you. So I think definitely if it's a good work environment and how much they're paying me, because I think it's important to each job that I have to get more money than I made at my last job, if possible.
Yeah. Moving on to Joseph, that question of how do you, like, what is essential for you in accepting a new job? But another kind of question, Joseph, you can answer this in your response, is kind of what Bria talked about, is this idea of like money playing a role. There's been a lot of conversations when people say, if you accept a role, like don't ever accept the first number they give to you as it relates to money. I'm curious what your thoughts are on that, Joseph, and I'll ask the full group, but I want to start with you.
Yeah, I mean, I think that works until you are a nonprofit arts administrator. So, you know, often there really is not that much wiggle room. I have negotiated in a couple of different settings, but also I have in just as many settings, if not more, been offered, you know, what the limit is. And then, you know, even at large organizations, sometimes, you know, even like relocation and things like that are not offered. So I think that's something that kind of comes with like nonprofit arts administration. You know, I didn't go into arts administration for money. You know, if I really was looking for money, I would be practicing law somewhere and probably making double the amount that I make now. But that's really not kind of what I'm necessarily looking for. And I think that the money comes later. So, you know, when I left law school, I think, you know, I'm making probably like over double, you know, what I was making when I first started, just because your first entry level roles, especially in certain areas, it's just going to be low, and you just have to find an organization that you're interested in working with. And as Bria said, organizational culture is really important. Thinking about like, is this organization mission aligned with my values, and am I aligned with the mission of this organization? You know, how do I find myself identifying with this work? And that's something that I'm constantly thinking about, and something I've had issues struggling with, kind of with orchestras, and kind of thinking about the things that they do, and are these really authentic principles that I feel like are truly embedded in the community? You know, often not. So, you know, I feel very fortunate to have landed currently, you know, in an organization like Carnegie Hall that has like some really deep community and social impact initiatives. Specifically, you know, a project that I'm working on is called the Lullaby Project. And we provide caregivers with opportunities to work with professional artists to create lullabies for them and their babies, as a means of strengthening the bond between parent and child, but also supporting maternal development and childhood well-being. So I think, you know, for me, the role is, you know, it's not really about the money. It's really about kind of the work that I'm doing, and, you know, what I'm getting from that as a professional. And, you know, other things, you know, come along with that. So, you know, I'm also excited. It's my first time as an arts administrator having a supervisor that is of color, and those things matter, you know, because, you know, it's always important to kind of have a supervisor that's going to be invested in your growth. And sometimes, you know, I can't always rely on my white counterparts to really be supportive of my growth. So, you know, things like that. But I think that, you know, kind of there's always going to be a push and pull. Sometimes you get things you like, sometimes you get some things that you don't like. But I think as you continue to build your resume, you kind of get more gravitas to kind of make more decisions on the environment that you want to be in.
Yeah, no, I think that's great. I think the idea of understanding values and understanding what's important to you, and also knowing what field you go into is really great to hear. And great that you felt that as well. Justin?
Yeah, I just wanted to add one thing. I remember applying for a few jobs, and there was one particular school, the principal wanted me to have the elementary school kids, particularly kinder to fourth grade, I believe, to go on tour. And I was like, and go where? Um, how do you have a music program already established? Do you have, you know, different positions to help supplement, you know, guidance throughout this? Because I'm only a music teacher. I'm not, you know, drama teacher, instrumental teacher, anything like that. And all she could advertise me was this price tag of how much she could pay me. And I was like, no, like that, just because you have this doesn't mean I'm going to give you my all in all and be dependent on whether these kids can go on tour throughout the East Coast or something like that. So always know there's a limit to like to what people are asking from your job. It's just sometimes just so ridiculous.
Okay. Justin, you felt a way about that, but Bria, I'm curious about you. You know, and I know this wasn't one of the questions that I put in the email to you, but money, like, how do you believe in negotiating? How does money play a role when you're accepting a new job or a
I'm
new
not
role?
gonna lie, I have tried to negotiate and it never works. So I don't know if it's just I suck at it or they just don't want to pay me more. I honestly don't know. But I will say, like, luckily every job that I've had, it did make more than the last, but not because I asked for it. I asked and they were like, yeah, no, like that's all we can do. So journalism and film, I think, is also an area where they may be capped out at a certain amount. I don't really know, but I'm terrible at that. So if anyone has tips on how to do that effectively, I'd love to hear that. But like I said, money for me has never been, I think I've had jobs where it paid less, but it was a good environment. And I'm so like, that is what matters to me the most is, am I going to be happy here? They can offer you as much money as they can, but if the place sucks, like, why would you want to be there? So I think that's an important focus too. But I also think something that I want to stress is that I had to learn is there's no perfect work environment. So I think you have to really focus on what are the things that I value most in my workplace, because you're not going to have everything. That's just never going to happen. So just focusing on a place where they can give you the things that are most important to you, I think is important.
Yeah. Joseph kind of touched on kind of what is important to him and projects that are passionate for him to kind of work on. Curious, Bria, what's important for you when you're talking about a workplace and the environment? What are some of the things that you...
Sorry, didn't mean to cut you off there.
No, you're good.
I think one thing that at least I really like in my job now is I also have the first person of color boss I've ever had that was not a white male. So I have a Black male boss, which is really nice to see. And I really, in my reporting, I really like to focus on race and justice. And if I can be in a work environment where that is, like the main thing that I'm doing, that's very important to me. I think I've been in newsrooms in the past in work environments where that wasn't important to them. And there was a lot of white colleagues that were like, this is not an issue. I'm like, maybe it's not an issue for you, but it's an issue for a lot of other people. So I think being surrounded by people who understand that is pretty important to me.
Yeah. How do you navigate, and this is to the full group, this also wasn't part of the email, but it's coming up in this conversation. How do you navigate being one of, or if not the only person of color in rooms and spaces in professional settings? Like, how do you navigate that? How do you navigate having a white manager that may not be aware of all the things that come with being a person of color, specifically a Black person, right? How have you navigated that? Not sure who wants to go first on that, but I'll give you all a...
I think that sometimes it's just like, to be frank, white people can be very oblivious, and sometimes you just have to just knock on the door like, hello, think about this. I think it's just as simple as that. I think particularly the orchestral field in classical music can be so insular sometimes. And, since 2020, it's been interesting to kind of see the enthusiasm and also lackluster sense of accountability, as I would say, up until now, 2023. But I think now it's a much more safer space to be a contrarian and to really call things as they are. And at least people will try their best to keep up appearances and entertain those conversations. And I think the more and more you do that, the more and more we can build out frameworks for accountability. But I think that you really just have to hit the nail with the hammer. Like, just, hey, this is something that is a microaggression. This is, not equitable. This is an exclusionary practice, and really put the ball in their court to kind of deal with that. I think that for far too long, people of color in primarily white spaces have kind of like minimized themselves. And I think that now is just like an empowering time to really just kind of like encourage a constructive dialogue and really just, uncover all of these things that have been hidden for so long.
I think that's great. I think call it out, to your point, when it happens and allowing them a moment to kind of sit with it. I love that. I do that too. I don't believe they need to hear it.
I can
Go
speak
ahead,
to that
Britt.
as well. I think, well, in my experience, I'm very vocal about things. So if I don't like something, I am going to say it. And sometimes that works, other times it doesn't. So I think I've kind of learned like when the right setting for that is. I've learned that in group settings, that people get really defensive and they will be like, what is your problem? So if you're the only Black person in the room and everyone's white and you say something that they don't like, it doesn't work. And then people in the workplace will maybe turn against you and not want to work with you anymore. So that's been an issue for me in the past. So I think now I've had to learn kind of to focus in on, okay, who should I approach first? Should I do it separately? But then it is hard because it's hard to be in a room and not want to call it out when you see it, like you said. So that's a tough line to walk, because I almost feel like if you don't call it out in a group setting, then nothing's going to get done about it, or they can ignore it if you just pull them off, like to the side and bring it up. But then you also run the risk of, in my personal experience, calling it out in a group setting and the whole group just not, being accepting of that. So that's been tough for me personally.
Yeah. Justin, anything to add?
I think Bria had said this. What I was going to say, it's a tough line to run, especially if the field that you're in is predominantly white, and networking is a thing. And if what you said is telephone gamed around to something else, then that just makes it trickier. So yeah.
And then the next step to that is, I'm curious, networking, a lot of people say plays a huge role in careers in general, but especially in the performing arts, in the arts and mass media, it plays a role. Curious if you all believe that, and if so, why? And if not, why not? I'll start with Justin.
I personally think it contributes a huge role. Personally, for me in my singing career, I think once we exited the crux of the pandemic, I kind of said I wasn't going to sing anymore, and I got pulled from one singing gig. Someone heard me there. Then I got pulled to another singing gig. Someone pulled me from that gig, and I ended up singing somewhere else, et cetera, et cetera. So since I think 2019, I've been performing regularly, and I have not done a single audition. And so, I mean, a part of that is luck, but that's a part of it is because I work well with my colleagues. I've been professional in rehearsals and performances. People have come out to see my performances and say, well, why don't we have him do X, Y, and Z? And so, I mean, things have just kind of laid the track before me to travel on. So networking has done the work for me after I've done the work that I'm supposed to do. So yes.
What about you, Bria?
I am a serial networker. I love networking. I do it probably more than maybe I should. I don't know. But I think if there's someone that has a job that I want, or someone that is working on a project that I like, I will contact them and reach out and, like set up a call, or just want to, so I can pick their brain and learn more about how they got to that point. And it's really helpful for me. I feel like I wouldn't have had most of the jobs that I had if I didn't do that. I got the job I have now because my boss posted about it, and I messaged him and said, I want an interview for this job. And he was like, sure. And that's how I got it. I think my first internship that I got was because it was actually in college, Ky'Lend. NBC was on campus, and they had their news van, and the door was open. And so I just popped my head and I was like, hey, like I got in the van and I was like, hi, I'm a college student. I really want to work here. And then like a year later, I applied and they're like, oh, like you're the girl in the van. I was like, that's me. So I think you really have to put yourself out there. And if you do that, I think it works.
All right. What about you, Joseph?
I really feel like the power of networking is just indispensable in the arts, just because, it's highly competitive. There's like such a finite amount of roles. And, I think that you have to be impressive and talented, but you also just have to know people. Just because, like, it's 500 applications, for one one role, in New York City. And it's like, sure, like, probably like close to 200 of them, probably like great people. But it's just like, if you don't know anyone, your network is limited. It's just going to be hard to get noticed. And it's going to be hard to even find out about opportunities. So, I think that the field is very small. Everybody knows everybody. And, if you go to the right conferences and events like that, I think that it's quite easy to kind of be in the field, especially if you do things that are focused on arts administrators of color. I think that, I recently completed a fellowship with the Sphinx organization, and that really has kind of changed the game for me, just because normally I am the only person of color in a lot of spaces. So that can sometimes create barriers for the networking. But then when you connect with other people that are like you, it becomes that much more impactful, just because people are more invested and really want to see you grow.
Yeah. No, I think that that's great. I think the idea, to your point, and I think you all kind of referenced this, is like you have to be creative, good at what you do, but then once other people pick up on that, it helps you. I personally hate networking, but I do think it's played a role in my career thus far, because I think, Justin, what has happened with me, to your point, is that people work and it's kind of passed it on, which is great, which is how I got this role at CAAPA, actually. Shout out to Pamela. All right, so when you were in high school or college or just beginning your career, did you expect it to go where it is now, right? So the current job that you're in, the current roles that you have, did you expect it, like when you were studying for this in school, did you expect it to kind of turn out to be where you are now? I'll start with you. Sorry, Justin was like, I don't know. I'll start with you, Bria.
So definitely not. When I was in college, I went to fashion school at first at FIT in New York City, and I thought I was going to work in the fashion world forever. And then I got there and I hated everything about it. The people were terrible and it just wasn't working out. And then I met you, Ky'Lend, when I transferred colleges, and I was like, oh, I'll try this journalism thing and I'll try film. We'll see how it goes. And I fell in love with it right away when I met you in student media, and that's why we're friends now. But yeah, I didn't really know what I was doing. I think each step of the way I was figuring that out, and I think each opportunity that I had taught me more about what I wanted. So I feel like for me, it's just been like learning as I go. And right now I'm really happy in the role that I have.
That's great. So I can take credit for your success, is what I got from that. Joseph, what about you? Did you expect your career to be where it is now when you were in college?
No, and I think even though I studied arts management a little bit when I was in college, I really didn't have a sense of the breadth of opportunities that were out there. And up until, excuse me, my last year of law school, I had all full intentions of being an attorney. And then I actually went to a seminar called Essentials of Orchestra Management, where the door was open for me to know about all these different opportunities. And I just decided that I was going to run with it. So, the last 5 years have really been me just building the plane as I'm flying it. And it's just gone particularly well for me. I mean, I wouldn't, if you had asked me in high school or college, if I thought that I would be, working as an administrator in the arts, I would be like, what is that? But, the more, I guess you only know what you know. So as I've discovered different possibilities, I continue to open more doors and just kind of see what's out there. And it's been promising so far. So I'm quite pleased.
All right, Justin.
So no, I did not see myself being here in this spot. And I think a big factor, and I think my colleagues can agree to this, is that I was just in a very different place when I was in college and when I was in high school. At that time, I wanted to sing full time and I wanted to travel, and that's all I wanted to do. Now me as an adult have different values. I want to stay grounded, eventually have a family, settle down. I don't want to be traveling for the next gig and going here and going there and missing out on family and friends and things of that nature. So I didn't see myself being an educator because my mom was an educator, and she came home and she was just so mad at kids all the time. I was like, I'm not doing that. And so here I am doing what my mom does. So yeah, totally left field.
That's nice. It's like you're following in the family footsteps. All right. So you all have talked about a lot of accomplishments you'll have had over the past like three months. Bria and Joseph started new jobs. Justin, you got to perform at the Kennedy Center in your solo debut. So that's the next question I personally hate, but I said I'll post to you all. Maybe you all love it. What is the next project that you would like to work on? The next thing that you're in, a career goal? What do you want next for your career?
I'll go next. This may sound silly, but I want a remote job. That is on my list for this year. I have a lot of friends who have remote jobs. I'm so jealous of them. They're always texting me. I can never respond. So yeah, I've been starting to take some classes on some certain fields to get some certifications and certificates to start exploring different things so I can try to do online. And that would just help with my performance lifestyle. So I can just stay at home for work and then I can leave to go to rehearsals instead of driving from one job and going to another job because travel is too much. So yes, remote.
Gotcha. He wants to work from home. Joseph?
I just feel like I'm just gonna pass on this question because I did a panel, like what was that, October? We were in a panel and I was like, oh yeah, I want to go back to New York and maybe work at Carnegie Hall, and I got it. So I'm happy right now.
You're right. You definitely said that, and look at you now. Yeah, that's good. So Justin, that means your remote job is coming up. We'll see it at the next panel. Bria?
I think this is something I've been thinking about a lot lately because the job I have now is my dream job, but I don't know what my next dream is. And I think that's like, I don't know, crazy. I feel like one thing that I've done in my career is always chase any dream that I have, which is risky and scary and it might not work out. But I think, as I'm living this dream, maybe I'll find something different and then I'll just chase that next. So I feel like I'm just keeping it open, seeing where this takes me and just making sure that even if it seems scary or a big risk, that I still go for it because life's just too short not to.
Yeah. And with that being said, we have come to our last question of this panel conversation. And you all have given a lot of great tips, a lot of best practices as to navigating a career in the arts, specifically as it relates to having freelance jobs and then also having a full-time job and then the balance of both of them at the same time. So I'm curious if you have words of wisdom for the folks who are watching, specifically those who are in high school and in college, and then specifically those who identify as Black, right? One word of wisdom for them for your final kind of goodbye. And we'll start with Bria.
Wow, that was quick. Let me get some words together. I think something that I wished someone would have told me when I was younger is to look at all of the opportunities out there. I feel like when I was younger, I had no idea what was even possible. And I don't think that high schools always do a good job of setting you up with what you could do as a job. So I think I would want someone to kind of tell me these, to help me evaluate what skills that I'm good at and what things that I'm passionate about and things that I'm interested in and see how that can translate into a job. I think that's something that would be super useful because I think a lot of people, you leave high school and you're 17, 18 years old, like you don't know anything yet. So I think it's just thinking about, what skills do I have and how can these turn into a job? And then if it seems like it's not possible, it's possible. Anything's possible. So just, focus in on figuring out what you can do and what's possible.
All right. Joseph?
I would just say just to follow your interests and to follow your passions and to kind of really think about on your most challenging and most sad days, like what is going to get you out of the bed? What is going to get you up and going? And find work that is really going to energize you in that way and just kind of give you that momentum. Because I think that, if you don't, I think that you can kind of easily kind of like spin out and just be kind of like disconnected. So I think just find that sense of purpose in your work and just keep pushing.
All right, Justin.
Okay, I promise I'll be quick. I have two things. One thing I was told when I was younger is don't be so narrow-minded and tunnel-visioned. And that's something when I was very young, I was very like operating, that's all I need to do. That's the only thing I need to learn. So please be open to what life brings to you. Please be open. Do not shut it off because you can't see how it benefits you right at this moment. My advice, my second advice, with this work-life balance, please find more time for life. That is my recommendation. Please find more time for life with people that you love, because you don't have the most time that you think you do. So please find that. That is so important. And as an artist, you need to experience life, because then you become unrelatable. So that's my advice.
That was good. That could be a TED Talk. All right. So I want to thank Bria, Joseph, and Justin for being part of this panel conversation. On behalf of the Coalition for African Americans in the Performing Arts, we thank you for joining us for Unplugged, Freelance to Full Time, and we'll see you again in the fall.
I would like to say thank you to our moderator, the panelist, executive director, and chairperson for providing such a rich and open dialogue. The panelists have truly provoked great thought and hopefully further conversation. I'd like to also offer a special thanks to all of our viewers for sharing in this moment. Thank you, and have a wonderful evening.